Hey, what's going on, guys? I just want to do a little bit of a video about my experience on Trenbolone and Nenthate. So Tren is like a very, intense steroid, and there's a lot of common misconceptions about Trenbolone. So I kind of want to clear the air and, make a little bit of a documentary about my experience on the compound, whether it's worth it in terms of looks maxing or whether this is something that you should avoid at all costs. And I would say that Trend is quite positive, and most of the copes that you read on the internet and like Reddit r slash steroids are just completely wrong, right? So it's like Trend has a reputation for being extremely unhair safe, extremely bad for your organs, and some of the stuff is just either blown out of proportion or just comically wrong, right? So the only way that trend could be a problem with your hair is it's freeing up other androgens from your androgen receptors because it's much more androgenic than testosterone. So right, so when you're replacing testosterone on the androgen receptor, you're freeing it up to convert into DHT and, utterly destroy your hair. But if you're on something like dutasteride that blocks that conversion, you aren't going to run into any problems from, trenbolone freeing up testosterone. So I don't think that's going to be a huge issue in terms of hair safeness. I think Tren is a very hair safe compound, and there's really no mechanism of action that anyone has ever been able to point to explain why Tren is not hair safe, right? So let's just get that out of the way first and foremost, because obviously hair is life. There's no denying that, and any amount of gains is not worth losing your hair over, right? So that's why things like Primobolan and Masteron you should stay away from at all costs because they will destroy that nice head of hair that you should do anything in your power to maintain, right? So right now I'm on 200 milligrams per week of Trenbolone and Enthate. I like the longer ester because you're not going to get the trend cough, right? Trenbolone acetate gave me a really bad trend cough. I couldn't really sleep on it. I was sweating a lot in my sleep, and it was just a horrible experience. So I would recommend staying away from acetate at all costs. It's going to hit you way too hard, short half life. It's just not ideal at all. So you want to be on a Nenthate, which has about a 5 day half life, right? So right now I'm currently pinning 200 milligrams, so I'll split it into 2 doses per week on like Tuesday and Saturday, for example, and I'll pin it sub Q into my hips. That way you don't really feel the oil. It's not really a nuisance in any way. And you could save your ventral glutes for other injections like your testosterone because, right, you don't want to have to be pinning your delts and your traps, and that way it's just a lot of avoidable pain, right? Because pinning your delts is just the ultimate cuck. It'll ruin your your upper body workouts, and that's just not something that you should desire whatsoever, right? So let's talk about a couple of the other benefits from Trenbolone. So Trenbolone has a lot of unique properties in terms of bone growth, right? So Tren is one of the most superior compounds when it comes to growing your bones. So it upregulates your IGF-1 receptors quite significantly, which is a huge part of growing new bones and getting that facial masculinization and kind of the dom look, like Tyler Mayer and some of these guys that have really strong bones. So it's going to prevent cortisol trend, which hence will decrease osteoclast, which kind of melt your bones. Excuse me. So by reducing the cortisol levels, your free cortisol, you're going to avoid this and also reduce your stress, which I think is a very underrated part of trend that not a lot of people talk about, because people only talk about its muscle growth properties and not really the lifestyle changes, which I think are extremely important. And Trend's nutrient partitioning is just unsurpassed by any other compound, right? That's why for cutting and even bulking, you're either going to get more out of your cut by not going catabolic, or you're going to get more out of your bulk by better nutrient partitioning. So I think either way, Trend is going to be unmatched by anything. But I would prefer to use it on the cut because it's not something that you could sustain forever. It isn't good for your creatinine levels in your kidney, all this different stuff. So I wouldn't permablast Tren or anything like that, but I'm just going to use it to maintain as much muscle as I can while I'm going on my cut, right? And another reason why it's super good on the cut is its MCR antagonism, which means like it's going to antagonize your aldosterone receptors, and you're not going to produce as much aldosterone, which is like the test bloat look where your face looks super bloated from steroids. Tren kind of does the opposite of that. So Tren will make your face leaner, whereas test makes your face more bloated, right? Con syndrome. Test leads to MCR agonism, more aldosterone, just moon face. So you got to reserve high tests for going on bulks where you don't really care if your face is chiseled or not because you're already going to be high body fat. Um, and Tren is also really good to pair with things like tirzepatide or semaglutide, these GLP-1 drugs that are going to help with your lean maxing. And when you're cutting, you take the dual incretin and you're not going to lose as much muscle if you're on Tren as you otherwise would if you're taking, Ozempic without any endogenous hormones, right? So, and its GCR antagonism means that any large fasting window you have, you'll be eating into fat rather than muscle. So it'll just make this cutting phase much, much better. It also increases insulin sensitivity, which allows for more consumption of fast carbs without risk of detrimental health, detrimental effects on health, rather. So just like overall, this is something that I would absolutely recommend that you heavily research because there's way too many lies on the internet, on Reddit about Tren. People attribute all the side effects from other roids to Tren when they're going on 5-gram blasts. So you won't really know what's causing your adverse side effects. So I plan on being on Tren for the next probably about 4 weeks. I'm going to cycle off to TRT, probably 150 milligrams of TRT. Just have my blood work come back into range because my liver is a little bit cooked from, heavy drinking, Accutane, some of this kind of stuff. So once I get that fixed up, I'll be green. But right now, bulking on Tren, I just started my cut about 2 days ago, but before this, I was bulking. I was able to go from about 202 pounds to close to 215 in the better part of a month, which is incredible gains. And as you can see, I haven't gained that significant amount of body fat. And when I cut, I'm probably not going to lose that much size because of the Trenbolone. So this is kind of a win-win compound. And I've used Tren in bulking phases, and I'm going to be using it in cutting phases. So I'll know 100% that it is great. Now, in terms of side effects from Trenbolone, right, this is important. I'm not going to lie to you. You're probably going to get side effects from Tren, including higher levels of prolactin, right? So your nipples are going to lactate a little bit if you run high doses of Tren. But if you take pramipexole to block the prolactin, you're going to be fine. Pramipexole has got basically no side effects. It's not bad for you at all. The only problem is it's dosed in micrograms rather than milligrams, so dosing it could be quite tricky if you're buying like raw powder from China of Prami. So, but it is much better than Caber because Caber causes fibrosis of the heart. So I would say that it's best to avoid Caber Goline at all costs and stick with Prami to avoid the high prolactin. And you are going to be, hornier than you could ever imagine on pramipexole. This stuff will literally make you want to slay out, some chicks that you otherwise wouldn't. Let's just say that. Let's keep it at that for now. So Prami is a very cool compound. Being a low lactin mogger is something that makes you feel like you're going through puberty for the first time again. So experiencing that while being on Tren, and you're going to be feeling like a whole new man. I can assure you that. Right. And there's one other thing that you need to keep in mind with Tren. So any neurotoxicity that's ever been, attributed to Tren is just because it messes with your circadian rhythm. But if you take a compound called SR9009, this is going to fix your circadian rhythm. So by the time it's time for bed, if you take it in the morning, you're going to go out like a light and have better sleep than you would off Tren, So like this stuff is a miracle compound. It'll keep your lipids in range, keep your sleep in range. So that way you're really not getting any of the bad neurotoxic side effects of Tren. Any neurotoxicity from Tren is pretty much cope though anyway. Tren is only neurotoxic without the presence of estradiol. But if you have any estradiol, which you would unless you're, taking Tren as monotherapy without testosterone, you're not going to have any neurotoxicity. from Trenbolone. So, right, this is like another one of those copes that we were talking about before. So, in terms of like, your glycogen stores, you're going to be bigger than ever, fuller than ever, and look extremely diced on Tren. So it's an addicting compound, right? The mental ascension, you're going to be lower inhib from taking Tren just because of a pure need for, basically having sex with girls, right? So you're going to be so horny off of Trenbolone that you're going to want to approach because you're like, I need it, man. So I think that's one of those mental ascensions that you get from the compound. So I would recommend hopping on Trenbolone as soon as possible and cycling it for 4 weeks at a time, 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off. And this is the key to the ascension. You're not going to get bad skin from Tren. As long as you pin it sub-Q and pin it frequently, you're really not going to have any issues with that. It won't cause hair loss. If you're good about your prolactin, then you're going to be fine on Tren, and all you're going to do is have a great ascension. So I appreciate you guys for tuning in. That's another video from Clavicular. Let me know what you guys want to see next.